So tonight we're doing unit 19 or chapter 19. Okay. And this is going to have to do with deeds. Okay. This is going to have to do with deeds. So what I'm going to tell you is this. So, you know, a lot of students always ask me, so in my live classes, I jump from chapter 7 all the way over to 19. And they always say, hey, why do we do that? Well, the reason why is this, okay? Reason why is because what we've done is, if you have been with me in my past classes, we've done freehold estates. We then did title, okay? We did what kind of title you would take to a property, so joint tenancy, tenants in common, okay? And then 19 kind of follows along in that progression. But now keep in mind this, if you were with me for any of those classes, yeah, it's a great, you know, basically 6, 7, 19 is a great order to go in the book, okay, if you're following along with me. But if for whatever reason you're not, that's quite all right. But I always like to say freehold estates, title, and deeds should be stuff that you're lumping together, because that gives you a clear picture of ownership of real estate, okay? So I always like discussing this. What is a deed? Okay, so first what we have to do is this. We have to talk about what is title, okay? So what is title? Okay, what is title? So for anyone who's been with me in my class already, who's in my live class tonight, what is title? When we're talking about title to a property, what is title? What is title? What is that? That's ownership, right? Title is proof of ownership. So title, what I would say is this, is proof of ownership, okay? So if you have proof of title, you have proof of ownership. Boom, done. Kaputskis, okay? Nothing else to it, okay? So title is proof of ownership. So now, magical question, what is a deed? Okay, a deed is evidence of transfer of title. Evidence of transfer of title. Now, what we're going to understand is this, okay? Basically, bottom line is, with a deed, you do not necessarily have ownership, okay? Have ownership if you have a deed, if you have a deed. And why do I say that? Well, when we get into this particular deed types, we're going to understand that there is one deed type where your ownership of the property may be in question, okay? You may not have ownership. So let's talk about this. We're going to talk first about the requirements of a deed, like what you need to have a valid deed and who's involved in a deed. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is this. We're going to talk about the grantor, okay? The grantor and the grantee, okay? Those are the two parties involved in the deed. The grantor is the one who is giving title, okay? The grantee is the one who is receiving, okay? So grantor gives, grantee receives. And if you know the rule is the OR is the giver, the EE is the receiver. OR gives, EE receives, okay? OR gives and the EE receives. So again, what we're going to get into right now is this. We're going to talk about what is required for the deed. Okay, so the requirements for a legal deed. Okay, for a legal deed. And then we're going to kind of sidetrack a little bit, because when we get to one of the requirements, we're going to have to talk about the three things. There's kind of like a little subcategory. We'll get there in a second. You'll see. So one of the requirements are the signature of the grantor. Okay. We do not need to have the signature of the grantee. Think of it this way. Okay. When you go to a store to buy something, okay, you go to a store to buy something, what happens is this: they give you a credit card receipt, they have you sign, okay? Then your copy of the credit card receipt sometimes does not have a signature line. Why? You don't need to sign something if you have accepted it. So another one of the requirements of a deed is delivery and acceptance. So delivery and acceptance, what does that mean? Someone has given it to you and you have received it. Okay. We have to have delivery and acceptance. The next one, we need to have a legal description of the property. Okay. Legal description of the property. So you need to have some form of legal description. And we're going to talk about, there's 3 types of legal description. So that's our sidetrack in a little bit. But I'm going to finish writing in what you need to have a valid deed. So you need the signature of the grantor, delivery and acceptance, legal description, and you need a granting clause. That is basically going to contain what's called a habendum clause, which contains the words to have and to hold. Okay, that's really all there is to that. There's not much else. It's just basically going to contain the words to have and to hold. And a granting clause, so what a granting clause is this. It basically quantifies what type of freehold estate it is, what type of title you're going to take to the property. All those things are going to be quantified in the granting clause. Basically, the granting clause is the reason we need to have a deed. Okay. So all of these things are the requirements, the legal requirements of a deed. Now, what I'm going to do is erase a couple things. I'm going to move some things around. Okay. I'm going to keep that up there. Now we're going to talk about the several different types of legal descriptions of land. There are 3. Okay. Legal descriptions of land. Meets and bounds. We use that in the state of New Jersey. The lot and block, also known as the recorded plat of subdivision. And then we have the third one is the government survey system. Government survey system. So I'm going to tell you about each of these. And we're going to talk a little bit about each one. And what I'm going to tell you is this. You do not need to know a super in-depth version of each of them. Okay. You don't need to have a super in-depth version of each of them. You just need to know enough that if you get asked a general question, you'll be able to do just fine answering the question. So the meets and bounds, it's actually short for the meters and boundaries of a property. It was one of the oldest systems of describing land in the United States. What they do is they would get a lot, and let's say this is a lot. They would start at a point, and they would describe the property moving clockwise, ending at the point of beginning. So basically, they would have a point of beginning that is an identifiable point. They would describe the property moving clockwise with direction, feet, things like that. Okay. And then what would happen is this. They would basically be able to describe the property that way. That would suffice as a legal description, because notice the property address is not a legal description. That is an insufficient descriptor of the property. Okay, here's the thing. It could describe it, but it's not considered a legal description. Only one of these would be considered it. So meets and bounds was the oldest form of basically describing land. Now, here's what happened. They quickly realized that there were some flaws in the meets and bounds system. So some of those flaws are they were using markers such as go 50 feet to Mr. Smith's oak tree. Well, guess what? 50 years later, Mr. Smith's oak tree isn't there. And Mr. Smith probably maybe not even there. So they started using man-made monuments called rebar. Like they look like little metal stamps. So you might see them somewhere. Like you might see government survey system. You might see survey system markers, things like that. Those would be called rebar, man-made. And that's what they use now. Okay, that's what they use now in regards to using the meets and bounds. So we still use that on the East Coast. There's a lot of states that still use that because if you have a meets and bounds description, it doesn't go away. But what happens is it's going to be a situation where they probably aren't going to be creating any new ones. So like when we move out to the West Coast, that's when we use the government survey system. And we'll talk about that in a second. But first, let's talk about lot and block, also known as recorded plat of subdivision. This is the primary way that we will probably describe land in basically the East Coast. Also, states that use the government survey system also are going to use a lot and block system. In a lot of them, it's a very easy way to describe land because you just get a map, you number the block, you number the lots, and you have a legal description. Think of it as like a super address. Like it's basically like an address, but it's considered a legal description. That's really what it is. And that's a very useful way to describe property. So in New Jersey, we're going to be using that. Now, government survey system. I'm going to put a little note here. Not used in any of the 13 colonies. Okay. So if you're on the East Coast, basically your western state border, it looks like a child drew it with a crayon. Probably not using the government survey system. It's also known as the rectangular survey system. Notice how when we went out to the West Coast, that a lot of those states look rectangular and square-ish, right? So that's one of the reasons why, one of the many reasons. What they do is this. So here's the thing, even though we don't use this in any of the eastern seaboard states, any of the 13 colonies, what I'm about to tell you is important because they will probably ask you one of these questions, like something on it, okay? What happens is government survey system looks like a grid, okay? So what happens is running north and south, you have a line called the prime meridian, and I'll just abbreviate it, the prime meridian, okay? And then running west to east is going to be the baseline, okay? It's going to be the baseline. So the prime meridian runs north and south. The baseline runs west to east. Now, within them is going to be other little lines. Now, in the state of New Jersey, you would not need to know these. Other states, maybe you would, okay? You're going to have other little lines called range and township lines. And what happens is they're going to create these little square boxes. That's called a township. And within every township, here is the size of a township. Township is going to be basically, now I'm drawing it half of the size, okay? It's 6 by 6, okay? So I'm drawing it 3 by 3. 6 by 6, meaning that it is 36 sections. 36 sections in a township. That's what they call them. They call them a section. And each section is 1 square mile. So New Jersey students, you would have to know that there's 36 sections in a township. Okay. You would have to know that one section is 1 square mile. So the size of a township is 36 square miles. Basically, other than that, you might get 1 or 2 questions on it, but I think those are gimme questions. Those are really gimme questions. Okay. And someone asked in the live chat, could I repeat the lot and block system? That is just a map that is recorded in the town, and each property is given a lot number, and the street that they're on is given a block number. So there is a lot and block. And again, very similar to your street address. It's just able to be considered a legal descriptor of land. Now, any questions on any of those that I already went over? Looks like nothing. All right. So now we're going to get into the different types of deeds. Okay. A township is 36 square miles. It is 36 square miles because there's 36 sections that are 1 square mile. Each section is 1 square mile. So the township is the bigger one, has 36 square miles. Okay. And a section is 1 square mile. So we need all the space we can get right now. So we're going to talk about the different types of deeds. Okay, so the difference between each deed, let me tell you what the difference is going to be. Difference in each deed is the promises the grantor makes to the grantee. We've already identified who the grantor and who the grantee are. OR is the giver, EE is the receiver. So if this was a sale, okay, if this was a sale, we would be saying that the grantor is the seller and the grantee is the purchaser. Okay. So if this was a real estate sales transaction, that's what we would be saying. Okay. So just so we keep everything all in the same thing. Now, the first type of deed, we're going to go to the most protective for the grantee down to the least protective. Okay. One that the grantor is giving the most in promises down to the least. Okay. So first one is a general warranty, also known as a warranty deed. This one, I'm going to make like simple, nice statements so that it makes it easier for you to understand, because you don't need a super complicated definition of this stuff. The grantor is saying, I have title to the property and I will defend it against any claims. So they're basically saying, if there's someone who makes a claim that they have what is referred to as superior title or a higher title, like they're like, I have ownership of that property. The grantor is saying, hey, I'll defend your ownership against that. They're basically guaranteeing your ownership. It is the best type of deed that a grantee could get. Now, it is also, because it is a situation where it's so protective for the grantee, that it is super uncommon. Okay, super uncommon. So general warranty deed, not done in practice. Okay, opens the grantor up to too much liability, because they're basically saying at any time anyone comes in and says, and they're basically saying now until any time in the future. That is a lot of openings that they're opening themselves up for. So that is not a common deed type, but that is, again, the most protective for the grantee, least favorable for the grantor, because they are giving the most as far as the guarantees. So they're saying, not only do I have title to this property, but I will defend it against any claims. Next one is a special warranty. Now, in New Jersey, we call this bargain and sale with covenants against the grantors, and I'm going to just abbreviate it CVG, because that's usually what we abbreviate it in New Jersey. But most other states in the country call it the special warranty deed. So you might be reading some prep material and see special warranty deed. They're referring to the bargain and sale CVG, and that's basically the same thing. So what the grantor is saying is this: I have title to the property, and I will defend only against my time with the property. That makes a lot more sense, okay? Bargain and sale CVG is going to be the one that we're going to be using the most for residential sales, commercial sales, like basically any type of sale is going to be like, hey, I have title to the property and I'll defend it against any claims to superior ownership, to any kind of encumbrances, any kind of issues that would challenge title to the property during the time that I owned it. If it happened before I owned it or after I owned it, on you. Okay. But during my time, yes, I'll defend it. Okay. Most common type of deed. That's for any state, any type of transaction that would typically be the most popular one. So the next one is bargain and sale. Straight bargain and sale deed They say, I have title to the property, but will not defend against any claims. When does this usually happen? Foreclosures. Foreclosures are typically most common time that you would see that. Okay. Most common time that you would see that. Okay. So basically, a bargain and sale is going to be where, if it's going to be like a bank owned property, they're going to say, hey, we have title to the property. We are not making any kind of claims against it. We're not going to defend it at all. Period. End of story. And the last one is a quitclaim deed. Not a quick claim. Everyone always says that. It's a quitclaim. It says, I may or may not have title and will not defend it against any claims. So what does that mean? That means, hey, I might not even have ownership to the property. Okay. So here's the thing. If you have, remember I said that there is one deed type that you might not have ownership. Yep. That's it. A quitclaim. If you have a quitclaim, you may or may not have ownership to the property. Okay. You may or may not have ownership to the property. Now, when does that come into play? When would you use that? Typically, that's that's going to be family members, divorce situations, things like that, or to what we call clear clouds in title, clear any kind of issues that might come up. That would be a good way to do it in certain circumstances. Okay. So let me ask you this. Everybody's here with me live. Do you have any questions for me that I could potentially go over to help you with this? Is there anything that I could possibly answer? Speak now. Yes, no. No. Pulled the room. No. When can a quitclaim be used? It can be used at any time, but basically the most common use for it is going to be when transferring amongst family members or in like a divorce situation. So, I mean, you could use it during any times, but as far as like when it typically would be used would be that. Okay. So that's typically when you would see it. Like if a grandmother wanted to give her, her grandson, property. Like literally that happened with me. My grandmother was like, hey, I'm getting old. I want to get this out of my name. And I was like, cool. Okay. I'll take your property. So she signed a quitclaim deed basically saying, hey, whatever I have, you now have. It was very quick. That's why a lot of people call it a quick claim. It was very quick, very easy, very simple. And whatever interest she had in the property, I have. That's it. Okay. So any other questions? But that was a good question. When is a general warranty used? It's never used. It's a silly deed. Wouldn't be a good time that it'd be used. Opens the grantor up to way too much liability. Like I couldn't create a situation that just wouldn't be, they were stupid, got bad legal advice. that's just opening them up to too much liability. Too much liability. Why does it exist? So that if ever there was a scenario that you could use it in, I mean, listen, it's a lot of things, it's a lot of things that don't make necessarily sense as far as a practical application. Also, too, in your real estate studies, you're going to see things that don't really have a practical application, that they exist, but there's just no practical application. Again, a general warranty deed, if someone wanted to use it, yeah, sure, they could. But again, it's just legally silly. And just there isn't a situation that I could even concoct that would make sense. So that's it. So what I'm going to do is stop the recording now. So anyone who's watching on recording, thank you so much. Have a great one.